They told me I would be here for a few days, just until I regained my strength, just until things settled. But when I opened my eyes that first morning and stared at a ceiling I didn't recognize, smooth, pale, and painfully quiet, I understood something had already gone wrong. This wasn't a place you passed through. This was a place you were put. I am Evelyn Hart, 74 years old, and I've lived long enough to know when decisions are being made about me instead of with me. The silence in that room said more than any doctor ever could. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? Tell me your city name in the comments. And if you enjoy deep, emotional stories like this one, subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life inspired stories. Your support truly means everything. Now let me tell you how it all began. A nurse entered quietly, her shoes barely making a sound against the floor. She smiled the way people do when they're trying to be comforting but don't quite know how. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart," she said, then hesitated as she glanced at her tablet. "I mean Evelyn." That pause stuck with me. "Where am I exactly?" I asked. She avoided my eyes. "You're safe here. This is Willow Creek Residence." Residence. Such a polite word for a place that smelled faintly of disinfectant and forgotten memories. I sat up slowly, my right arm still stiff from the mild stroke I'd suffered a week earlier. My children, Marcus and Lydia, had insisted I rest somewhere professional. I remembered Marcus squeezing my hand at the hospital, telling me it was just for a short while. Yet here I was, waking up alone. When the nurse left, I reached for my handbag. My phone was inside, fully charged. No missed calls, no messages. That alone made my chest tight. I tried calling Lydia. Voicemail, Marcus. Voicemail again. That wasn't like them. I swung my legs off the bed and stood carefully. The room was small, too small for something that was supposed to be temporary. One chair by the window, a dresser with chipped corners, and a framed photo of a beach I had never visited. Someone else's idea of comfort. Outside, a neatly trimmed garden stretched beneath the window. A few residents were being pushed along stone paths, their faces blank, their shoulders slumped. They looked like people waiting for something they no longer expected to arrive. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. A man in a tailored suit stepped inside, smiling as if we were old acquaintances. "Mrs. Hart, welcome. I'm Caleb Rowan, director of the facility." Facility, another careful word. "We're glad to have you," he continued. "Your children felt you needed a calm environment while arrangements are being handled." "Arrangements?" I repeated. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just formalities." After he left, a strange word echoed in my mind. Formalities, the kind people use when they don't want questions. At breakfast, I noticed something else. Staff members glanced at me, then quickly looked away. Whispers followed me like a cold draft. One nurse leaned toward another and murmured something I wasn't meant to hear. "She's the owner, isn't she?" "Owner," I nearly laughed. "Owner of what?" But deep down, something twisted in my gut, because no one is called something like that by accident. And as I followed a staff member down the hallway toward an office marked administration, I realized this place wasn't meant to help me recover. It was meant to keep me quiet. And whatever my children had done while I was unconscious, it had already changed my life forever. I didn't know it yet, but by the end of that day, I would learn my home was already gone, and my name was being used for something far darker than care. The hallway felt longer after breakfast, as if the building had quietly stretched itself while I wasn't paying attention. Every step echoed too loudly, every door seemed to close a little too softly. Places like Willow Creek were designed to feel calm, but calm can be manufactured. Silence can be instructed. I returned to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, phone resting in my palm. Still nothing from Marcus. Nothing from Lydia. I told myself not to assume the worst, but experience has a way of silencing optimism. Just as I set the phone down, it vibrated, an unfamiliar number. I answered immediately. "Mrs. Hart," a woman asked, professional, careful. "This is Naomi Wells from Crescent National Bank. I'm calling to confirm a recent transaction." My fingers tightened around the phone. "What transaction?" There was a brief pause, not hesitation, confirmation. "The transfer from the sale of your property." For a moment, the room tilted. "My property hasn't been sold," I said slowly, choosing each word like a step across thin ice. "Oh," she replied gently. "According to our records, the sale closed last week." Last week. I pressed my free hand against the mattress to steady myself. "That's not possible." "I understand this may be surprising," she said, her voice lowering. "But the funds were wired yesterday. I'm calling to verify the receiving account." My house. The one I'd lived in for 36 years. The one with the rose bush I planted the summer Lydia graduated high school. Gone. "Tell me the amount," I said. She did. It sounded like a stranger's number, too clean, too final. And the receiving account? I asked. I'm afraid I can't disclose that without authorization. We have your signature on file, my signature. Send me the documents, I said. Every page. There was another pause, this one longer. Of course, Mrs. Hart. I'll email them immediately. And if you believe this was done without your consent, I strongly recommend legal advice. When the call ended, the room felt unbearably quiet. I stared at the wall until my email notification chimed. One document, then another, then another. I opened the first file. There it was, my name, printed clearly at the top. But the signature beneath it wasn't mine. I knew my own handwriting the way you know your own face in the mirror. Mine always leaned slightly to the right. The E curved too much because I never fully corrected it. This signature was stiff, upright, careful in the wrong ways. Someone hadn't even tried to copy me. I scrolled. Power of attorney documents I had never seen, authorization forms I had never signed, dates that reached back weeks before my hospital stay. My hands were steady as I set the phone down. Shock doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it arrives as clarity. A knock at the door made me look up. It was Caleb Rowan again, wearing the same polite expression. Everything all right, Mrs. Hart? You left breakfast early. My house was sold, I said plainly. His eyes flickered just once. Yes, he replied carefully. Your children informed us they felt it was best given your condition. My condition, I repeated. Being alive, he smiled thinly. Transitions can be difficult. There it is again, I said. That word. He adjusted his tie. I suggest you speak with your family. So do I replied. But they aren't answering, he hesitated. They ask that you focus on resting. Then tell them, I said, meeting his eyes, that rest doesn't erase theft. His jaw tightened. Mrs. Hart, you're under a lot of stress. No, I corrected, I'm under a lot of deception. He left without another word. Minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Lydia. Mom, she said brightly, too brightly. I was just about to call. My house is gone, I said, silence. Then a sigh. We did what we had to do. We, I asked. Marcus and I, she said quickly. You can't live alone anymore, it's not safe. So you sold my home. We protected you. By forging my signature, her voice hardened. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I said. Where is the money? Another pause. It's being managed, she said. By whom? Marcus, she admitted. I closed my eyes. You didn't just sell my house, I said quietly. You erased me. She hung up. I sat there for a long time, phone resting uselessly in my lap. Not crying, not shaking, just listening to the truth settle into place. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't panic. This was a plan, and I was never meant to question it. That night, I learned something even worse than losing my home. My name had been placed on documents that could destroy me completely, and someone at Willow Creek was counting on it. The care home felt different once I knew my house was gone. It wasn't louder or quieter, just sharper, like every sound had edges now. Footsteps in the hallway lingered too long. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Even the walls seemed to listen. I slept poorly that night. Not because of fear, but because my mind refused to rest. When you reach my age, panic wastes energy. Instead, the brain does something far more dangerous, it organizes. By morning, I wasn't grieving my house. I was studying my situation. At breakfast, I noticed staff glancing toward me, then toward the administration wing. Their whispers followed a familiar pattern, my name, then silence. I sat with my oatmeal untouched, watching reflections in the glass. Years ago, when I still ran my late husband's bookkeeping after hours, I learned to read people the way others read headlines. This place was hiding something. As I stood to leave, my phone rang again. The bank. Mrs. Hart, Naomi said, her voice cautious now. I've sent the documents. Did you receive them? I did, I replied. And that signature isn't mine, she exhaled. Then you need to know something else. The sale package included an additional authorization. For what? I asked. There was a pause, a careful one. For assumption of liability. My grip tightened. Explain. The documents indicate temporary ownership responsibilities were transferred to you for a business entity connected to your residence. My breath slowed. Willow Creek. Yes. Words settled into me like a stone. They hadn't just sold my home, they had positioned me. After the call, I didn't return to my room. I walked the halls instead, slow and observant. A drawer at the front desk never fully closed, stuffed with unsigned forms. A nurse quietly relabeled medication trays without checking names. Nothing dramatic, just small signs of disorder beneath polite routines. That's when I heard it, two voices near administration. She doesn't know yet. She's asking questions. Lib should have waited. I turned the corner deliberately, letting my cane tap against the floor. The voices vanished. Inside the lounge, an elderly woman with silver curls motioned me over. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear. "You're the one," she whispered. "The one what?" I asked. "The name they keep using." I sat beside her. "What name?" "Hart," she said. "They told staff months ago there'd be a new owner, said she'd be old, easy." My chest tightened, but my face stayed calm. "Who told them?" She tilted her head toward administration. "The man in the suit. Caleb Rowan. Months ago, before my stroke, before my hospital stay, before my children brought me here." I thanked her and stood carefully. This wasn't opportunistic, it was prepared. In the afternoon, I passed administration again and noticed the door ajar. Inside, a young accountant sat hunched over a ledger. Papers spread everywhere. My name caught my eye, bold, repeated, indexed. I stepped inside. "Excuse me," I said. "Is that my file?" He jumped. "Mrs. Hart, I didn't hear you." "Why is my name listed under property holdings?" I asked. He swallowed. "It's restructuring." "What kind?" I pressed. His eyes flicked toward the hallway. "Fear, not of me, of someone else." "The facility's in debt," he whispered. "They needed protection." "And my name provides that?" I asked. "On paper," he said quietly. "Temporarily." Temporarily. The word people use when they hope you won't survive long enough to notice. "Did my children agree to this?" I asked. He nodded. "I didn't thank him, I didn't threaten him, I simply left." Back in my room, I locked the door and sat on the bed, hands folded neatly in my lap. Anger didn't rise, something steadier replaced it. Resolve. I wasn't here to recover, I was here to absorb blame. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Grandma, it's Ava. Mom won't tell me what's happening." "Are you okay?" My granddaughter. The only one who asked how I felt instead of what I'd signed. I typed back slowly, "I'm okay, but I may need your help soon. Don't tell anyone yet." The reply came instantly. "I trust you, trust." It felt heavier than betrayal and far more powerful. That evening, Caleb visited my room again. "We need to finalize a few documents," he said smoothly. "I won't be signing anything," I replied. His smile thinned. "Your children expect cooperation." "They expect silence," I corrected. "They won't get it." He leaned closer. "Mrs. Hart, confusion after a stroke is common." "So is desperation," I said quietly. "And you're running out of time." His eyes hardened. I watched him leave, knowing something important had shifted. They thought they had placed me carefully. What they didn't realize, I was already pulling the thread. The next day, I would learn exactly how deep the debt went, and why they were so desperate to keep me quiet until one specific deadline passed. I woke before sunrise, the kind of early that doesn't feel like insomnia, it feels like instinct. My body moved carefully, but my mind was already several steps ahead. When you've lived long enough, you learn the difference between worry and warning. This was the latter. I dressed quietly and slipped my late husband's old watch onto my wrist. The band was loose now, but it reminded me of who I was before people began making plans around me instead of with me. The hallway was nearly empty. Night staff nodded politely, assuming I was just another elderly woman wandering without direction. That assumption worked in my favor. In the common room, I sat near the window and opened an old crossword puzzle. I wasn't there to solve clues. I was there to watch reflections in the glass. Administration lights flicked on early. Too early. Something was moving. After breakfast, I walked outside to the courtyard. The air was crisp, grounding. A man sat on a nearby bench, thin and quiet, staring at the gravel beneath his feet. "They did the same thing to my sister," he said suddenly. I turned toward him. "What thing?" "Moved her in, sold her house, signed papers she never saw." His voice held no bitterness, only fact. By the time we realized, everything was gone. "How did they get away with it?" I asked. "They waited," he said, "until she felt too embarrassed to fight." I nodded slowly. Shame is their favorite weapon. Inside, I found the young accountant again, this time carrying a stack of folders. His hands shook. "Busy morning," I said casually. He let out a breath. "Deadlines." "Whose?" I asked. His lips parted, then closed. Then he leaned in and whispered, "The lenders." I waited. "There's a loan tied to the facility," he continued. "If it isn't resolved by the end of the week, the owner becomes responsible for the debt." "Owner? Which owner?" I asked. His eyes met mine, and he didn't look away. "You." The word didn't frighten me, it clarified everything. Back in my room, I reviewed the documents again. Near the bottom of one ledger was a date circled in red. 5 days away. That was the finish line. They needed my name locked in place before the collapse. And then I saw it. Notes in the margin. "MD unaware, proceed quietly." MD, my initials. They hadn't planned to ask. They'd planned to wait me out. I folded the papers carefully and hid them inside my pillowcase. Evidence belongs close, not locked away. That afternoon, Caleb cornered me near the stairs. "We need to talk," he said, voice tight. No, I replied, you need my signature. He lowered his voice. If this facility fails, residents will be displaced, staff will lose jobs. And that's my responsibility, I asked. You're the only thing holding this together, he said. No, I corrected. I'm the only thing you can sacrifice. His face hardened. Your children agreed. Yes, I said softly. That's what hurts most. He stepped closer. Then think of them. I replied. That's why I won't carry their lies. That night my phone buzzed again. Ava, I found a lawyer, not local. Quiet, he'll meet us tomorrow. I smiled for the first time since arriving. Sometimes rescue doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it knocks once and waits. I looked around the room, at the neatly folded clothes I hadn't chosen, the bed I hadn't asked for, the life arranged without my consent. They thought I was running out of time. They were wrong. I was just getting started. By tomorrow I would leave Willow Creek, but not as an escape. I would leave carrying proof, and someone very powerful was about to realize they had misjudged me completely. The morning I planned to leave Willow Creek, the building felt tight, like it knew something was about to break. Staff moved faster than usual, avoiding eye contact. Doors closed softly but firmly. Even the air seemed tense, stretched thin by secrets that could no longer stay hidden. I dressed slowly, deliberately. Not because my body demanded it, but because this moment deserved intention. I packed nothing unnecessary, just my documents, my phone, and the quiet certainty that I was done being managed. At breakfast, Caleb Rowan appeared again, his smile strained, his voice too controlled. Mrs. Hart, he said, we really need to finalize those papers today. I won't be signing anything, I replied. He leaned in. If this falls apart, your children will face serious consequences. I looked at him calmly. They already chose those consequences when they chose deceit. His jaw tightened. He said nothing more. Back in my room, I locked the door and waited. At exactly 11:45 a.m., my phone buzzed. Ava, I'm here. I took a breath and walked to the lobby. My granddaughter stood near the front desk, confident, composed, a sharp contrast to the chaos swirling beneath the building's calm exterior. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't rush, she simply existed with authority. I'm here for my grandmother, she said. Caleb appeared instantly like he'd been summoned. She's not cleared to leave. She doesn't need clearance, Ava replied. She's not a patient, and if you try to stop us, I'll call the police and a reporter. For the first time, Caleb hesitated. I stepped forward. You underestimated me, I said quietly. That was your mistake. He watched us walk out. The air outside felt like freedom. Ava drove us straight to a small law office on the edge of town. The lawyer, calm, sharp-eyed, listened without interrupting as I laid every document on his desk. This is fraud, he said finally, and it's deliberate. I know, I replied. He nodded. We'll file today. That afternoon, the first domino fell. Auditors arrived at Willow Creek. The bank froze all transfers. An injunction halted the ownership shift. By evening, Caleb's carefully managed world began to collapse. I didn't celebrate, I prepared. Because the next people I had to face weren't strangers, they were my children. The truth was finally moving, but the hardest confrontation was still ahead, and it would cost me more than money. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because clarity has a way of keeping the mind awake. Once the truth stands fully formed in front of you, there's no returning to comfortable illusions. By morning, the lawyer had already filed the first reports. The bank confirmed the freeze. The care home's lenders had been notified. Everything was moving now, quietly, officially, irreversibly. But paperwork is only half of justice. The other half is facing the people who believed you'd stay silent. Ava drove us to Lydia's house first. She offered to come inside with me, but I shook my head. This part is mine, I said. Lydia opened the door with forced surprise, her smile tightening the moment she saw me standing there, steady and uninvited. Mom, you should have called. So should you, I replied and stepped inside. Her living room was spotless, carefully arranged. No room for discomfort, no room for truth. I placed the documents on her coffee table. Her eyes scanned the pages, color drained from her face. Where did you get these? She whispered. The question, I said calmly, is why you signed them. She sat down heavily. Daniel said it was temporary. So was my freedom, I replied. Tears filled her eyes, but they came too late to soften anything. We were desperate, she said. His investment collapsed. We needed money fast. So you sold my home. And you forged my name, I added. She didn't deny it. I raised you to ask for help, I said quietly. Not to erase me. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. This isn't about punishment, I continued. It's about accountability. Her voice broke. What happens now? The truth, I said, and whatever follows it. I left before guilt could try to bargain with me. Daniel was next. He didn't pretend to be surprised. You're overreacting, he said. You're old, Mom, you needed help. Help doesn't require theft, I replied. I invested the money, he said sharply. It could have doubled. My life is not your risk portfolio, I said. His anger rose, but underneath it was fear. I've filed charges, I told him. Fraud, forgery. Exploitation. You wouldn't. I already did. I walked out without waiting for his response. Back in the car, Ava squeezed my hand. You okay? Yes, I said, surprised to mean it, because something had shifted. I had stopped carrying shame that was never mine. By the end of the week, the consequences would arrive, not just for my children, but for the man who thought he could hide behind my name. By the end of the week, Willow Creek no longer felt like a sanctuary pretending to be calm. It felt like a building waiting to confess. I didn't need to be there to sense it. Word travels fast when lies begin to collapse, especially the kind that hide behind polite smiles and signed forms. Ava stayed close, checking messages from the lawyer, the bank, and the investigators. Every notification was another crack in a structure built on silence. That morning, the call finally came. They're there, the lawyer said. Auditors and state investigators. Police may follow. I closed my eyes, not in relief, not in triumph, but in recognition. This was the moment I had been walking toward since the first night I woke beneath that unfamiliar ceiling. Ava drove me back to Willow Creek, parking far enough away that no one would think I had returned as a resident. We walked toward the entrance together. Two dark sedans sat in the lot. Men and women with folders moved with purpose. No rushing, no shouting, just inevitability. Inside, the lobby buzzed with low voices. Staff stood in clusters, whispering. Some looked frightened. Others looked relieved. Truth does that, it terrifies the guilty and frees the rest. Caleb Rowan stood near administration, trying to look composed. His tie was loosened. His smile had disappeared entirely. When he saw me, his face hardened. You did this, he said under his breath. No, I replied evenly. You did, I simply refused to disappear. An investigator approached. Mrs. Hart will need a formal statement. I'm ready, I said. Inside the office, documents were spread across the desk, the same ledgers I'd seen before. My name circled, dates highlighted, signatures flagged. These entries list you as an owner weeks before your admission, the investigator said. Did you authorize any of this? No. Did your children? They authorized things they didn't explain to me, I said carefully. But I never consented. Outside the office, voices rose. Caleb argued. The accountant broke down. The story unraveled thread by thread. When the officers finally escorted Caleb toward the exit, he didn't look at me, not once. The doors closed behind him with a soft final sound. Emily, the nurse who'd warned me, stood nearby. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes wet. I'm glad you're safe, she whispered. So am I replied. The care home would close, residents would be relocated, staff would scatter. But dignity had finally been restored. With Willow Creek exposed, only one chapter remained, the aftermath, and the choice I would make about the life that was finally mine again. The world didn't snap back into place after Willow Creek collapsed. Justice rarely works that way. Instead, things settled slowly like dust after a long, violent shake. Court filings replaced whispered conversations. Official letters replaced late-night phone calls. And silence, real silence, not the manufactured kind, finally entered my life. I moved into a small rental cottage on the edge of town while everything was sorted. It wasn't fancy. The porch leaned slightly to the left, and the wind rattled the windows at night. But the key was mine. The door opened because I chose to open it. That mattered more than space or comfort. Ava visited often. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes books. Sometimes she brought nothing at all and simply sat with me while we watched the afternoon light crawl across the floor. One evening she asked softly, Do you miss your old house? I thought about it carefully. I miss the memories, I said, but I don't miss the way it was taken. The lawyer called weekly with updates. The bank confirmed restitution. The forged signatures were officially declared invalid. The liability transfer was voided entirely. And my children, they went quiet. No apologies, no explanations, just distance. At first, that silence hurt more than anger ever could. But over time, I realized something important. Peace doesn't always arrive with closure. Sometimes it arrives with boundaries. When the judge asked how I wanted the recovered funds handled, I didn't hesitate. A trust, I said, for Ava. The courtroom fell still. Ava's breath caught. Grandma, I've already lived my life, I said gently. Now I want to protect someone who wouldn't sell my future to save herself. Later, outside the courthouse, Ava hugged me tightly. I promise I'll make you proud. You already have, I replied. That night, sitting alone in my cottage, I realized something else had returned to me, something no document could ever guarantee. my voice. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't asking permission to exist. I was living. What I didn't know then was that my story would soon reach someone unexpected, and the final chapter would change more than just my life. I thought the story would end quietly. Justice served. Papers filed, lives redirected. That's how these things usually conclude neatly, officially, without echoes. I believed I would settle into my small cottage, watch the seasons pass, and let the world move on without me. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the final ruling, my lawyer called with a tone I hadn't heard before, not urgent, not cautious, but curious. "Mrs. Hart," he said, "have you spoken to the press?" "No," I replied. "Why would I?" "Well," he continued, "someone else has been." It turned out that one of the investigators had shared the case, anonymously at first, with a journalist who specialized in elder rights and financial exploitation. The details were too precise to ignore. A care facility, forged signatures, children acting as intermediaries. A woman declared confused simply because it was convenient. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails from strangers. Letters from families who suspected something similar had happened to their parents. Messages from people who had been made to feel small, forgettable, disposable. I read every one, not because I had answers, but because I recognized the fear behind their words. The same fear I'd felt sitting on that unfamiliar bed, wondering when my life had been quietly reassigned to someone else. Ava sat across from me as I read, her expression a mix of pride and concern. "You don't owe them anything," she said. "I know," I replied, "but I can still choose to help." That's how the meetings started, small at first. A local community center. 10 people in folding chairs, no cameras, no speeches, just stories, shared carefully, respectfully. I didn't stand at the front, I sat among them. I told them what I'd learned, not legally but personally. How shame is often used to silence. How paperwork can be weaponized. How age is treated like weakness instead of experience. And I told them this: if someone rushes you, slow down. If someone speaks for you, interrupt. If someone tells you it's for your own good, ask who benefits. The meetings grew, organizations reached out. Advocates asked me to speak not as a victim but as a witness. I declined most invitations. I wasn't interested in becoming a symbol, but I was interested in becoming visible. One afternoon, months later, I drove past my old neighborhood. The house was still there. Someone else lived in it now. The rose bush was gone. I didn't stop. Some chapters are meant to close without ceremony. That evening I sat on my porch as the sun dipped low, Ava beside me, laughter drifting in from a nearby yard. My body was older, slower, but my life, my ownership of it, had never felt stronger. They thought putting me in a care home would make me disappear. Instead, it returned everything they tried to take. My name, my voice, my future. And this time, I chose what to do with it.